Okay, I think we should get started. First of all, welcome to the Poultry Health Research Network seminar series. And indeed, we've been very fortunate to have had the opportunity to have Mr. Tim Nelson from Livestock Research and Innovation Corporation. He's a very hard man to get hold of to begin with, and it was almost impossible to ensure that we can get 1 hour of his time. So, and he's been gracious enough to give us that 1 hour of his time.
Thanks, Cheyenne.
So, I'm not actually trying to embarrass you or anything like that, Tim, but you're, I would say, a man in demand, high demand by lots of people. So thank you very much, Tim, for.
I'm actually just hiding.
No, I would say a man in high demand.
There's some truth to that. You're done with all the charms at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, that's right.
So it is my pleasure to introduce Tim Nelson. Most of you know Tim, so probably I don't need to do a whole lot of introduction here, but for the sake of those people who are logging in through the internet and so forth, we're going to do a formal introduction of our good friend and colleague, Mr. Tim Nelson. Tim, as you know, has recently, as of two and a half years ago or so, was appointed as the CEO for Livestock Research and Innovation Corporation. Prior to that, Tim was the executive director for the Poultry Industry Council, and I actually got to know Tim when he was appointed as the executive director of PIC in 2007, and I believe he immigrated to Canada in 2006, if I'm not mistaken, based on the information I have here. But prior to that, for 10 years, he was in Australia and was serving as the executive director for West Vic Dairy, which was a dairy research and development organization servicing some 1,800 dairy farmers at a 300 plus dairy research farm. It was called Demo Dairy, and it was situated in Western Victoria. Tim has got lots of responsibilities, and he's a multifaceted man. Even though he's the CEO for Livestock Research and Innovation Corporation, at the same time, he has represented industry, various sectors of industry on OMAPRA theme advisory group panels for both emergency management and for production research. He's also on board of OAFE, Ontario, what does that stand for?
OAFT?
E.
Ontario Agri-Food Education.
Excellent. That was my quiz of the day. I didn't actually know what it stood for, but anyways, and Tim, aside from that, also has undertaken his own research projects. So when he doesn't do Elric and acting as a representative for industry, he also does conduct his own research, and he's undertaking some research in the area of dairy water use, which was funded by OMAPRA and DFO. And he's also recently completed Lyon's Disease Focus Farms project. So aside from that, on a more personal note, I have to say that Tim, if I were to summarize him, I would say he's a visionary man, he is a thought-provoking person, extremely engaging, and you're going to see a lot of it is going to come out in his presentation. If I can tell you anything about his presentation is that you're not going to be bored. He's going to treat us to a wonderful presentation. So now that I've lifted all the expectations, Tim, I'm going to leave the podium to you.
I'm out of here. Okay, let me put the necklace on. Thanks very much, Cheyenne. The ANNU's program was actually a couple of years ago now that was completed, but it was a lot of fun, and I do enjoy doing a bit of research every now and again when I get the chance. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about something that I've been quite passionate about for quite some time, and in fact, for any of you who were at a poultry priority setting meeting for the country in 2010. There are a couple of slides in here that I'm still using because they're still relevant today as they were back then. And I put one in just for Cheyenne because he keeps reminding me of that slide and saying how much he enjoyed seeing it. So I've put it back in this one just for you, Cheyenne. And so the Poultry Health Research Network is really a great example of collaboration. And it's through groups like this that I believe that we will see some more interdisciplinary research over time, and indeed some cross-sectoral research coming out of groups like this that can see beyond poultry and the relevance of some of the work that some of you guys do to other sectors. And I know that there are some of you in the room who work in other sectors. So Josh is here somewhere, I don't know where he's going to sit, there he is, works in swine as well as poultry. And so already we've got people who are in this group who are working across the sectors. So, the title of my talk today is Cross-Sectoral, Cross-Disciplinary Research. Is it a reality or a dream? So he said I'd challenge you, so here we go. Or is it actually a future necessity? And I think given, well, I hope I'll make a reasonable fist of trying to demonstrate why I actually do believe it is going to be necessary to get some of the work done that I think industry needs doing. There we go. So just as a very quick introduction, and because it's very relevant to the rest of the talk, I'd like to just point out what the Livestock Research Innovation Corporation vision and mission are, and then a couple of our strategic objectives in which you will see, writ large, I think, the type of stuff that I'm going to talk about today. So our vision is very straightforward: research and innovation driving livestock sector success. So we're all about research and innovation, and we're all about seeing the livestock sector in this province be successful. And research and innovation being a big part of that success, in driving that success. Our mission is that we work collaboratively, so it's all about collaborations, on behalf of industry to coordinate research priorities and engage in partnerships, so it's all about partnerships, to maximise innovation and the return on research. And for my clients, so the livestock sectors of this province, this maximising of innovation and the return on research is key. And we have to be able to demonstrate that they are getting a maximised return on maximum innovation and return on research. So the two things that I'd like, we have more than two strategic goals, but the two that I'd like to point out that are absolutely pertinent today is our first one, which is that the research priorities of the Ontario livestock sectors are addressed. And the main piece here that I'd like you to look at is this one, which is the identification and coordination of cross-sector research priorities to link common needs. And that is writ large in the objectives under that first strategic goal. In our second strategic goal, again down here, we have a mandate to evaluate and plan for research capacity. And we have a memorandum of understanding between the university and the OMAFRA in relation to how we go about planning for not only the physical resources, and you're all aware of the new dairy barn, and we're currently negotiating with a beef barn, and we are also currently just beginning negotiations on a new swine barn, and then a new poultry barn will follow fairly quickly after that. So we're heavily involved in that process. Now it's important, I think, that you understand what is our role in determining priorities, and the first thing is to point out that we do not determine the priorities. The priorities are determined by the sectors, and we work with them to create essentially business plans. Because if you don't know where you're going, and we have management people in the room, they will tell you that if you don't know where you're going, then you don't know what work you need to do to get there. And so their research strategies are very much in the vein of a business plan. They have specific outcomes, they have goals and targets to reach those outcomes, and they have the overarching need or whatever's driving that particular aspiration. And part of our role is to try and engage and pay attention to everybody who is trying to shape the outcome of the research, because the days are gone, as I'll hopefully point out, where we can just have a couple of people say, you know, we really need to do this, and so that's what we're going to do, and then have that's the impact on the research that goes forward. So when we engage with the sectors to develop their research priorities, we bring in a very wide group of stakeholders. So we bring everybody in from input suppliers right the way down to the food service people, and also and all you guys as well, and retail. Or we try as much as we can, because we need to hear from everybody to make sure that we've got the plans right. And then, there we go. We then also provide information to the province on common themes within the strategies. So all the strategies were developed together in the same format, so it was easy for us to pull out what are common themes in those strategies, such as antimicrobial resistance, environment, phosphorus runoff into the Great Lakes. And then we evaluate the research, the projects that come across our bows for a fit with the plan that the sector has and the impact. And it's in this section here that we get to see research applications from lots of different sectors. And it's at that point that we can think through some of the work that we've done earlier in relation to which sectors have got some similarities and say, okay, maybe we can have this researcher and this researcher get together. Maybe this researcher can get some funding from another sector for this research. And that's what I want to talk about today. And obviously we look for measures of return on investment. So that's important as well, because we need to be able to demonstrate that there is going to be a return on investment from the investment that the sector is making or the province is making. So, poultry research priorities. I'm going to ask you the question. You all work in poultry research, so what are the top 3 priorities for the poultry industry right now as of today? And you may get it right, you may get it wrong, I don't know. Steph? Welfare. Good one. I'm going to write them down, because we don't have to agree on them all, but let's get something written down. So welfare is 1. And I would have to agree with that. Another one. Growth promoters? Growth promoters.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can I extrapolate that out to antimicrobial resistance?
Sure.
One more. We don't need one more. That's enough, but
Food safety.
food safety. That's pretty broad. It'll do though. That's enough. That's good enough, because my next question is, how many of those are single disciplinary issues? What single discipline can address welfare, antimicrobial resistance, or food safety? Not many, I don't think. How many of those are cross-sectoral issues? Who else has those issues at the moment? Pretty much everyone. And how many have components that could or should be funded by more than one sector? I'd say welfare might be different because slightly different species, but I would say that there's some early research in antimicrobial resistance that could be shared, cross-funded. And food safety, it's a no-brainer. If we're doing something about salmonella, it's going to fit everybody, is it not? So that's the point of this whole exercise, is we need to look at these things. We need to look at what are the drivers that industry, or what are the issues that industry is facing, and how can we actually jointly address those. How many of those are being addressed already by other sectors? All of them. How many are being addressed together with other sectors? Not many. So, what is the main issue here? I would posit that the main issue is change. It always is. What generally is. We all like to go on as we go on, but change sort of gets in the way. And within change, what are the issues? Well, is internal industry environment changing? Yep. There is the external environment that is constantly changing. There's less money around, definitely, for research, and the cost of research is increasing. And we have some changing targets. So let's look at that first one. If we're talking about the internal industry environmental change, one of the big changes is consolidation. Farms buying farms. What does that mean when farms get bigger? Well, what it means is they're looking for economies of scale, they're going to drive more efficiencies. Not super relevant in a supply managed industry, but take this to a broader group, or think maybe about the future of supply management, and this is certainly becoming important. That gives the farms more power to purchase solutions. And this purchasing of solutions is in order to become number one, to become the major driver, to become the person in industry, to keep ahead of the rest of the pack. I'm sure all of you know John Donkers, or have heard of John Donkers. I think I'm right in saying he's the largest poultry producer in the country, just outside of Elora. I don't know what sort of quota he's got. Do you think he looks at the sort of research that we do here? Well, I can tell you he doesn't actually. He goes to the Netherlands every year and goes to companies who are going to provide him with solutions. Which means that people like John Donkers and the future will be less reliance on publicly or industry-funded research. And therefore there's less requirement for individual commodity or productivity research for people like him, because he's going to go somewhere and buy the best solution. He's an information seeker. Which unfortunately means that there's going to be less interest in funding of public research and institutional research as farms get bigger and they can just do their own thing. So that's a problem. The second problem is that we got really good at production, really good at it. So genetic selection, nutrition, health and welfare, really drove productivity increases in the 50 years from 51 to 2001. And I'm picking on that because we have those numbers. So eggs, for example, productivity, this is not just production, this is productivity increases up by 1.8 times in that period. And chickens up, productivity up by 7.6 times in just 50 years. I mean, this is unprecedented. This comes from this great book that Jim Dalrymple and co wrote 2007. And if we look again at what genetic selection, nutrition, health and welfare looks like from a poultry perspective, it looks like 150 eggs per hen housed in 51 to, keep going, 325 in 2006. That's a pretty huge increase in just 50 years. And if we look at the feed efficiency there, we went from 3.4 to 1 to 1.4 kilos per dozen eggs produced. That's pretty huge efficiency gains. And if we look at broilers, it's even more impressive. The 7.6 times productivity came with only use of 15% more land and a feed efficiency increase that went from 6 to 1 to 1.6 to 1 in just that very short period of time. This is huge productivity gains. And actually, this is what it looks like in the, and I'm sure all of you have seen these from Martin Zoidov's book from last year. Pretty impressive stuff in a very short period of time. The question is, do we still need to be doing this? And are we the right people to be doing it? And so we look at the external environment and see how it is changing. And again, here comes consolidation. So input suppliers buying input suppliers. What does this mean? It means that large corporates are forming, and we all know who they are, and I'll look at a couple of examples in a minute, and they're doing their own research. They're not looking for institutional research anymore. They're doing their own things in-house, and they have $1 bazillion to do it with. And they now provide solutions to John Donkers and people like that. They're not interested in looking at small research projects. It's really tough because the stuff that you guys do is groundbreaking, but these guys are doing their own things and they're sort of sweeping. Look at Syngenta, Monsanto, and those guys. They do the research and they get it implemented on farms and the farmers pay for it. I think we're going down the same track. And you know we're going down the same track because if we look at some examples, the poultry genetics companies, there's really only now 2 in the world for poultry. If we look at the feed companies, and I thought this was quite an interesting comment on this, and this is just one example. In October 2012, Ridley's, or Feed Right as they were known here in Canada, merged with Master Feeds, which then was again bought by Alltech end of last year. But Rob Flack, who was the CEO of Master Feeds and became the CEO of the merged group, said the increased consolidation and sophistication among livestock producers led to this merger. So here we have producers consolidating on farm and getting bigger farms, and then we've got these guys consolidating to be able to supply those farms with solutions. And then finally, of course, there's Big Pharma. And you may know all this stuff, but some big numbers here. In April 2014, $118 billion worth of pharma deals were proposed or announced. Not necessarily all livestock pharma, but that's all pharma. And the US pharma consolidation over the last 20 years leaves only 11 members of the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America compared with 42 in 1988. So this is real consolidation. And if you're wondering what it looks like that just for Merck. Actually, do Merck still exist? I wasn't sure. This is, I think, an older paper now. Are Merck still going, or have they now been bought? Anybody know? Still going, yeah, as an entity. So you can see here's Merck, and then they just sucked up all these shearing plough. They became shearing plough, and then they've all sucked them into that. But more impressive still, I think, is this one, which is Pfizer, who did pop out of poultry for a while, but then popped back in again. And there's 10 companies here that have ended up all being Pfizer. So this is consolidation writ large. This is an organisation that is doing its own research, that is providing solutions to giant farmers. The second environmental change is the changing societal needs, and we see that. We see society driving the production agenda. We've seen that their agenda is not necessarily residing in science either, and certainly not residing in a single discipline. And I mean, many of the production solutions that we are now having to employ have no science behind them, and yet we're still banning cages, we're creating aviaries, we have free range, we've banned beak trimming. All these things are coming across our bows, and we are having to try and keep up with that, which is really difficult. And these are the people, they're just us. They're just people just like you and me until they get their uniforms on. And then they're not like us. Then they think and they know that they're all powerful and they can drive the way in which we produce meat products. So we have to pay attention and we have to react. We need to keep the food that we're producing and putting on tables cheap and safe and plentiful, but we now have to have more variety, we have to have nutritional attributes, we have to have health attributes, we have to have more value add, and so on and so on. And at the same time, we have to look after the environment. We have the welfare of poultry in our care as a major driver now, and we're not allowed to use genetically modified organisms, and of course, we still have to feed the extra 4 million people that we're going to have here in Ontario by 2041. Because if we don't, we'll be buying stuff in to feed them, and that's probably not a desired outcome for industry. So the third thing is less funding from government. And this is a diagram or a graph that John Cranfield produced some time ago. But it shows here, the bottom is the livestock funding by Agriculture Agri-Food Canada for research between 1996 and 2004. And you can see that it is very much a downward trend. And for those of you who were been in the poultry industry for quite some time, in person years, in 1991, the federal government employed 27.63 person years of people. 10 years later, they were down to 7.64. 10 years later, we were really, Steph Torrey's still here, thank goodness, and Josh Gong is here as well. We were down to 5.5, and now in 2015, we're down to 1.5, and that's Joshua Gong, but he tells me that he has got somebody else who works with him. We have Carl Lassard in Saskatchewan, who spends a very small amount of his time working on poultry research, and that's it. It's pretty pathetic, isn't it? Anyway, there are also seemingly disproportionate funds allocation at AFC into poultry. So in 2007, I'm sorry I haven't got any more updated figures, but you get the idea. They put $30 million into plant research, they put 5.8 into animal research, and you can bet your bottom dollar that poultry research didn't actually get much of that $5 million. Industry funding has remained pretty flat for the last 3 years, and OMAFRA likewise is holding fairly steady. OMAFRA actually is our best friend right now, and fortunately they get money from the federal government as well, so they're not hurting too much. And the good news is that they're pretty much holding steady, and with their investment in new infrastructure, I think they're putting their money where their mouth is anyway, in terms of funding research. So OMAFRA really is our best friend. Second last one is cost of research. Well, there's not much to say about that. It just doesn't get any cheaper. And research is becoming too expensive to support large multidisciplinary livestock research programs at individual universities. We are uber lucky here at Guelph that we have a really strong network in poultry health, a really strong network in poultry welfare as well. I mean, we are incredibly lucky that we're able to sustain those two things here. And now finally we have a poultry nutritionist on the books again, which is great news. But this sort of thing, universities being all things to all people, is a thing of the past. And finally, high-level outcome targets are changing. So my question here is, who is actually interested in blue sky or discovery or fundamental research anymore? Federal government? Let's have a look and see what our previous minister said. Our government is committed to moving ideas from the lab to the marketplace more quickly, strengthening Canada's economy while creating jobs. That doesn't sound like blue sky research to me. That sounds like very applied research that's going to be rolled out next week that's actually going to get some people in jobs. And our Minister of State, Science and Technology said about the same fund, our government is investing in research and innovation to create jobs. Well, there you go. There's not much blue sky visionary stuff in any of that, is there really? So what about institutions? So one of the things that surprises me a little bit, and Dave, you can comment on this if you like, is that the number of patents issued, and this is US data, and it's been since 1995, it's really been on the increase, is now a legitimate measure of success of an institution. And some granting agencies require that patents are filed if industrial funding is granted. And so this came from the Baylor University Patenting Handbook to researchers, and it basically says keen competition for federal research grants has increased the importance of industrial research funding, which usually requires the resulting technology to be patent protected. So I have a couple of questions about that, which I don't know the answers to, I'm just posing them. So does this relatively new, 1995 to now is still relatively new, 20 years, add to the cost of research? Does it delay tech transfer? If things are getting locked up in patenting or IP control. And does it actually reduce the desire of industry to invest at late stage? I don't know the answer to that. I'm posing that question. I think it's worth feeling that one out a bit, because if I'm industry at late stage and you come to me and say, I just need this last little bit of money to do this, and then I'm going to sell it to Pfizer and I'm going to make $1 bazillion and then they're going to sell it back to you guys, you know what, I might not be that interested. Anyway, questions to ponder. So in summary, what are the issues? Internal environment is changing. Consolidation, really good at productivity, has caused us some problems from a research perspective. External, research resource perspective. External environment is changing. Input suppliers buying input suppliers, farmer feed, etc. Changing societal needs, less money from government, static from industry. Cost of research, no comment there, it just keeps going up. And changing targets. So those are the issues. So the question is, where are the cross-disciplinary opportunities that will help us alleviate some of this? So I'd like to just consider sustainability, and it goes back, if you like, to that stuff about the environment and the society and all that type of thing. Consider sustainability for a minute. Sustainability rests on the principle that we must meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's a broad, and I'll show you where this comes from, that's a broad definition of sustainability. I think it's fair enough. If you're going to look at sustainability, you've got to look at all facets of it, and you've got to look at all elements that make up sustainability, which means you've really got to look at sustainable agricultural practices from a systems perspective. So it's essential to have a systems perspective if you are going to understand sustainability, which goes to this whole business of the whole is greater, or other than, I think was the original quote, than the sum of the parts. And a systems approach also implies interdisciplinary efforts in research and education to meet this, bring us into this systems perspective for getting us towards sustainability. So holding those thoughts, and this comes from UC Davis. Here's an example of cross-disciplinary systems research. In my opinion, this is an example of it. Oh, sorry, I don't know. Let me go back one. Has anybody seen this system? I think I had this slide at the nutrition series talk, but has anybody seen this system at all? Let me tell you what it is very quickly then. These things up here are holding fertile eggs. And this is a vencomatic system, and it's brand new, and they're selling these like crazy into Russia, where they're building barns like you wouldn't believe. And what happens is that these, everything is modular. So these great big trays, all in semi-trailers, and they incubate them at a hatchery to the point at which they then take them out, and then they give them all the in ovo injections and what have you, stick them back on these, and then they bring them into these giant barns that are specially made to hold these trays. What happens is when the chick hatches, it drops straight onto the floor. The litter is already prepared and seeded with feed. The water is right next to them there. And so there is no transfer of chicks from a hatchery to a production unit. It's really very smart. And the other thing with this is that you would know that when you are hatching chicks, if you're in a hatchery, if you're in an incubator and you hatch before everybody else, you're going to sit there and wait for the rest to hatch before you get your first feed. This way, as soon as they hatch, they drop down and the feed is already here in the litter, ready for them to start munching on. So it's a really good way of getting feed into chicks right away, the minute they drop. Rather brilliant, rather expensive. How did this come about? It came about because welfare researchers were involved. Somebody had to work out how far that would be without a broken leg, and other stuff as well. Nutritionists were involved because they had to know what to put down here in the feed and how to make sure that it's going to be okay for a long time. How's it going to be sustained? Is it just going to go off in there? Oh, there we go. Veterinarians clearly would need to be involved because there's got to be a whole lot of animal health or poultry health issues in relation to a system like this, where you've got birds that are newly hatched dropping down and goodness knows what else if you've got some disease in there. So veterinarians would have had to be involved. Engineers clearly were involved because the whole thing is modular. And producers were involved as well in saying, this is what we need. This would be great if we didn't have to have that transfer of chicks because lots die, lots fall behind and when they arrive. So if we could just do this straight away, if the eggs arrived and then suddenly, and the broilers stay in here, by the way, they never leave this place now until they're finished. So they stay here to 35, 42 days, whatever it might be. So they never actually leave that environment. So it's very cool. But all these people were involved in developing this system, a whole lot of research from all of those different disciplines, and probably a whole lot more as well. So for me, this is a good example of a cross-disciplinary systems research model that brings together researchers to work on a common goal. So where are the cross-disciplinary opportunities? Well, addressing societal needs, Stock and Burton in 2011 said our contemporary social and ecological problems, including climate change, peak oil and food security, necessitate solutions informed by multiple backgrounds that singular disciplines seem unable to provide. I don't think anybody would deny that that's the case. I'm not sure about the last part of that, possibly even incapable of providing, don't know. I'm sure that's not really the case. And then this other group, which was this was a paper released in December, 1st of December last year, and it comes out of the Oxford Journals, said, considering the complexity of the world problems, it seems evident that they do not fit straightforwardly into a disciplinary framework. And so, again, both of these groups are saying, everything is so complex now, there is no compartmentalization. The silo model really doesn't work that well. And they're saying in this context, the question arises as to whether and how frequently several disciplines cooperate on research projects. Okay, so cost spreading, the clusters. I have a question for you here. So it's another one that I'm going to challenge you on. So according to the CPRC, which came off their website back in 2014, a cluster brings together multidisciplinary teams of scientists to solve complex problems and to create synergies in research efforts. And I'm sure that is exactly what they are designed to do, and it's right. And it speaks to those other two slides that I just put up before. It's a way to make the most of available resources and supports a strong business case for investing in Canadian poultry. Fantastic in terms of getting a good bang for your buck from an industry perspective and from a government's perspective. Don't get me wrong, these are really very cool because the leverage is massive on them, or was. I don't know about GF3. Pooling the intellectual and financial resources to address issues of common interest is a powerful way to maximise the impact of our collective investment in research. Couldn't agree more, but I'm not sure if the clusters actually are multidisciplinary teams working on a single problem. They seem more to me, and I'll stand corrected, like a lot of researchers who are working on their own stuff and are just kind of working together in the same room or at the same institution or whatever. I'm not sure, unlike that example of the chicks falling down, that the researchers are all aiming towards one common goal, other than making the industry better. That's a pretty broad goal. So I'm not sure whether we can say that clusters really are multidisciplinary teams. I'm challenging you. I'd love to be knocked over on that one. Actually, I probably wouldn't. Clusters have a significant component of applied research in them as well. And that's the other piece in this, that there is definitely, if I've got it right, you're all involved in clusters, I think, pretty much. I don't know there's a lot of blue sky stuff in clusters, is there? I haven't seen it anyway. No, not hearing anybody say. Josh?
I have two cluster projects. In my case, I work with University Guelph faculty members.
Yep.
And I'm a microbiologist.
Yep.
We have the poultry science, like Jim Swells and Steve listened with me. So I found it fantastic. That's the other one with John Prescott.
Yep.
And we work on ANNU disease control, and also found it's good combination.
Yeah.
But that's just in my case, okay?
Yeah. Well, good examples. I might use those later in the talk. So this is Shan's favourite slide from a long time ago. So just to sort of make the point that we've been on this for a while now, is that this was the first slide in terms of poultry that I put up there, saying that back in 2010, this is okay for now. Welfare research, we have Hank Claessens, we have Tina Wadowski, and Michelle, whose surname escapes me. Thank you, General, who are all working on welfare research. But my point at this meeting was that the future of welfare research really would reside in the multidisciplinary team. So it would reside with Steve Leeson, who's now gone, a nutritionist, the welfare researcher, and also, well, Mr. Microsoft. So I didn't have an IT person to put in there that anybody would know, but everybody knows Bill Gates, so I put him in there. But that was my sort of thinking about what multidisciplinary teams would look like. There's a cautionary note on disciplinary research, and that is this, and it's the same people that wrote the other piece about how marvellous it might be, Stock and Burton, and what they're saying is, the literature and our own experiences bear out just calling a project beyond disciplinary, and that was really my example with the clusters, or integrated, does not necessarily yield the intended outcomes or make progress towards alleviating the hurdles of bridging the disciplines. So if we're still working within our disciplines in a program, but we're not actually working towards a common goal or a product or a solution or whatever it might be, then are we really being multidisciplinary? And so the definition of it is, I think, not clear. And then the other guys from the Oxford Journal, Mutz and Bonham, cross-disciplinary cooperation in research might be difficult for a couple of reasons, and I think this is very true. On the one hand, many researchers feel that efforts to achieve methodological rigour, exactness and control are only possible in a circumscribed area of discipline, and I think that's fair enough. That's what everybody is trained and taught to do, so I think that's a fair comment. And then on the other hand, and I think you could probably see NSERC in this clause here, it's claimed that funding organisations with their rigid disciplinary classification systems impede cross-disciplinary research in the context of their selection and evaluation procedures. So I would suggest you can, I mean again this is from the US, but I suggest you could probably see NSERC fitting into that category. And so we need to be having discussions at a pretty high level with government, I think, about how do we actually make the clusters more effective if we're going to go down the road of more clusters. I think we are. We're not actually sure what they're going to call GF3 yet. But I think the clusters will live on, from what I'm hearing. So against this backdrop, can we sustainably maintain single disciplinary, which we do now, and cross-disciplinary, so we've had some examples of that research, and introduce cross-sectoral research into that mix successfully? So some solutions could or should be cross-sectoral solutions, and here are some examples that I think should fit this bill. So this is from last year. Pig producers could soon be using viruses to treat bacterial infections. Professor Martha Clokey from the University of Leicester is going to be leading research into certain types of viruses that could be used to treat salmonella. Salmonella. So why not poultry as well? If we're using viruses to treat pigs, why are we not doing early stage research, the blue sky stuff, and getting the disciplines, getting the sectors together to fund this work? I don't think we are. And the sectors probably would like to fund this work because we all have that problem. Dr. Lee, who's with us today, is creating antimicrobial peptides with high antipathogenic properties, effective against salmonella, strep suis, and E. coli. Is this a solution for our antimicrobial resistance problem? Perhaps it is. So why not pigs, poultry, dairy, and beef all funding this? Because we all have that problem. And in talking to Julang, this is something that could be used in all of those sectors. We need to get together earlier when we're looking for funding, because if Julang is looking for $100 and goes for $100 for pigs, they're going to say, well, I haven't got $100. But you know, $25 from each is a whole different ballgame to achieve the same end result. And yes, at the end of the day, there's going to be different ways of applying the technology on the different sectors. But in the initial stages, when we're up there on the blue sky stuff, why wouldn't we be all funding that? And I think we would. But we have to hear from you, and that's part of Elric's role. This is another good one. I don't know if any of you have seen this. It was recently announced that this has actually now gone finally commercial. This is actually looking at the sounds that pigs make and then analysing that sound and determining what the infection that those pigs have. And then there's an automated therapeutic decision which results in whatever their treatment is going to be, and climate controllers and all sorts of very clever stuff that's in there. So it's early clinical diagnostics and it's using sound. It started in 2000 and it's now in barns in Europe. So again, my question is, who are the researchers here? This is cross-sectoral and cross-disciplinary solution. The researchers in this would have to have been engineers, would have to have been IT people, would have to have been veterinarians, etc., etc. The list must be massive of the researchers that worked on this solution. And so my question is now, why not calves and poultry in there as well? Why is it only there? And why are they not bragging in Europe about this is in poultry barns now and this is in calf barns now? What's the first thing you listen for? Oh, I shouldn't say that. What do you do when you first walk into a poultry barn? You listen, you look, and you smell, and then you know whether there's any problems in there. If they're making funny noises, you can be pretty sure there's something going on. Is that right, Michelle? I mean, that's the first thing farmers do. They listen and they look and they smell. So why not automate it if the algorithms already exist and the technology already exists? Heck, you know, we industry should have been right in at the beginning of that and not just the pig industry funding it. Dr. Nithirajan is with us today. Again, this is cross-sectoral and cross-disciplinary solutions Innovative detection and advanced diagnostic technologies for farm animal health management. This is animal-side disease diagnostics. The disciplines that are involved in creating this stuff, again, has to be IT, has to be veterinary, this is lab-on-a-chip stuff, has to be engineering, etc., etc. So this is really multidisciplinary stuff. And the sectors that could benefit, it's all livestock and poultry. If I can stand next to a hen and get a bit of manure, or go and prod a cow and look for whatever it is I'm looking for, everybody benefits. So the advantages of cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral, in my opinion, are that we can spread the cost. And this isn't for everything that we do. This is just something that I think we ought to be looking to really try and drive. We can spread the cost because multiple sectors can invest proportionally in whatever it is. The bigger the dollars from industry, the better the leverage from government. It's a kind of a no-brainer, even though the funds from industry are going down. But more industries that are involved, the more government like it, the more they're going to get behind it. There's many more opportunities for tech transfer because you've got broader reach across the sectors. So if you've invented something, or you have IP in something, or you have something that is ready for KT, and you have 3 sectors involved, suddenly you've got 3 times as many end users that are going to be using that technology. There's more opportunity for private investment. So if we're looking at late stage research here, and you've had other species involved in the early stage research, you're going to have venture capitalists saying, well, who is this good for? Well, it's good in poultry. Well, if it's good in poultry, pigs and calves, heck, I think if I was a VC, which I'm not, by the way, that's why I dress so shabbily, there would be a lot of interest, because suddenly the market for the product that I'm going to invest in is huge. But I think importantly, if we're looking at early stage research, which is really hard to fund, there's more opportunity to find enough support from early stage blue sky fundamental research if you're talking to different sectors and getting small amounts of money from each. There really isn't a lot of appetite for this, unfortunately. So Elric's role, we have 3 roles. We're a talent scout. So at the blue sky discovery fundamental research stage, we, all of us, well, all me and Rebecca, but all of you, need to encourage researchers to think about cross-sectoral application and relevance to other sectors. We need to start thinking that way now, not just thinking poultry, not just thinking swine. We need to work across the disciplines to look at the potential for cross-sectoral, cross-disciplinary ideas. So when we're seeing research applications come through, we now manage research for poultry and swine, all the LOI through to final peer reviews. And I believe we're going to do the beef ones this year as well. So the sectors are coming on board slowly but surely. It gives us an opportunity to look at what's being proposed and what issues they are addressing. And if there are commonalities, then it's incumbent upon LRIC to go and try and look for some other funding, I believe. I think that's our role. As a facilitator, so we have run a forum last year for cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral research idea sharing. So we ran 2 forums in 2015. Some of you, I think, came to the first one, probably none to the second, although we had a couple of guys here presenting at those. And so this is new stuff. So we were sort of playing with it at the first one to see what would work and what wouldn't work. They were both sessions were well attended by industry. So in the first session we had a sort of general group, and we talked about some ideas that we actually pinched from overseas and asked for their feelings on whether they would support that or not. But at the second meeting, or the second forum, it was an invited audience from the sectors, and we only invited 4 researchers from the University of Guelph to pitch to them. And not just pitch them and say, here's my great blue sky idea, but here's what it means to your sector, your sector, your sector, and your sector. 4 slides, did we say, or 3? I forget. So they had to do all that in 3 slides, just like a proper pitch that you would do if you were pitching at the Dragon's Den or whatever you call it. No, you call it something else here. Griffin's Lair here. Same sort of thing. It was well attended by industry, and guess what industry said? They've asked to see more. There you go. And I think 2 of those projects will get some funding in time. It might not be immediate. These things take time, as all of you know. As a coordinator, so we are an applicant for program funds on behalf of industry, and the groups we're working with at the moment is we are developing what will end up being a very large proposal that we hope will turn into a cluster for feeds research in the 2018 for 5 years going forward. We work with the CG Farad group, so that, well, the group, there's only one of them really. There's 2 of them, Saskatoon and here. That's the Canadian Global Food Animal Residue Avoidance Database, which is all about research. We just got $100,000 for these guys to buy a new piece of equipment that's situated across at OBC. We're working on some stray voltage in current work with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and through that medium they have brought to the table
all of the sectors to work on some research, which is, the research part is flaky, but the whole point of the exercise is, we're fronting an application to AAC for them. The whole point of the exercise is to try and raise awareness of this issue, which is an issue. It's been recognised for a long time in the US. We just don't recognise it here yet. And we have a Gut Health Awareness Day, which is happening on the 18th of February at the Arboretum. But one of the things that led to this is some collaborative work that we're doing, where Elric has managed to help a researcher from Sick Kids Hospital connect with New Life Mills, who are a feed company and also a poultry producer, Doug Corver out at University of Alberta, Cheyenne Sharif, who else is there? Lalamond. A number of players are involved in that to try and look at the issue of antimicrobial resistance in kids at Sick Kids Hospital, using poultry in the first instance as their model. And once they've sort of got a better idea of what they're looking at, I think they'll then move on to the swine industry, because they're obviously a better model for human work. And so we act as a coordinator to try and pull all these things together. But all of these things, as you can see, are cross-disciplinary. C.G. Farrell does research for all sectors. So our strategic mandate, just going back to it, is the identification and coordination of cross-sector research priorities to link with the common needs. And the other two that we have in there fit in quite nicely with what we do. So just as a reminder, so that's why I'm here, and that's why we are interested in this area. So in summary, cross-disciplinary research, as we've seen, is already a reality. That's fine. I'd like to get a better definition of what's cross-disciplinary research going, somehow, a discussion. Cross-sectoral research will become a reality in time. If we want to maintain critical mass of research, cross-disciplinary / cross-sectoral research will become a necessity, I believe. Your role as poultry researchers, this is the only bit you need to remember, really. Don't be shy. Come and see us. Got an idea and you think it might fit across other sectors? Talk to us. We're not in the habit of giving away good ideas. Consider who else would benefit from and be interested in your work, what other sectors might be, who else you might work with. Consider who else could fund your work. It's all about the money, so who else would be interested in what you do once you've got something? Connect with other sectors. So go occasionally to the pork guys run some really good
days occasionally around the province. Go to one and listen and hear what other researchers are doing. Learn about their issues and look for commonalities, AMR, phosphate run-up in the Great Lakes, diagnostic techniques, etc., etc. You'd be amazed how much you've got in common. Talk to Elric. But most important message for this group is start to think outside of the shell and think very big. Thanks and questions.
Thanks very much, Tim. And I have to tell you, you did not, you definitely fulfilled the promise to be very thought-provoking. That's for sure.
Okay.
So I'm sure that Tim would be more than happy to entertain a couple of questions. And before I do that, before I open the forum, I'm just going to say that we do actually have more than poultry researchers here. We do actually have swine researchers and also dairy researchers, or Dr. Filippo Miglior from industry is also here, from dairy industry. So Tim, audience, it's free for all.
Challenge me, I made most of it up.
I have one question. The whole idea concept are very good. Also, it's not first time I hear about think about like outside of shop. First time I heard you said this is in Ottawa 2007 and 2008.
Yep.
I thought it was very good. I agree with you, like in the disciplinary and the cross sections collaboration, but how to build up the critical mass. It's challenging.
Yep.
I give you an example, like antibiotic resistance and alternatives to antibiotics. For example, the swine and poultry industry, they may have different priority.
Yep.
When you target specifically. In chickens, like boilers, they mainly think about the Clostridium perfringens, which is the major problem. If we can solve that problem, probably more than half of the problem of antibiotic resistance that problem is resolved. But when you talk to swine guys, they think about differently. They think about the like KDA. They're not thinking about Clostridium perfringens anymore. So when you, yeah, the common topic is the same. If they can control that particular pathogen, they probably will reduce the use of antibiotics in feed.
Yeah.
But when you specifically how can you pull these two groups together, because the techniques developed in chickens may not be able to apply to pigs because the targets are different. And in addition, like say we work on the other example, we work on encapsulated essential oils. When we deliver to the pigs, will be relatively easy. But when we deliver to the chickens, it's much more challenging.
Right.
Because chickens have crops.
Yep.
Just like they grow everything. So the bees have to be a certain strength to get through and the crops get into the gut.
Right.
So those are, I know that under the same big umbrella is right.
Yep.
But when it comes to specific topic, how to get the researchers and different industries together.
Right. So you're right at the end there. You're talking about chickens have crops and pigs just have a gut. So at that point, when you're at that point, when you've got your essential oils that are effective against whatever the common pathogen is that you are trying to address for those two species, then you are looking for separate money, and maybe from a venture capitalist or whoever. But when you're in the early stage, when you're trying to demonstrate that your essential oils are effective against those particular pathogens, who funds that research? That's where I think at that very high level, industry should be getting together to help fund work that will help address the common problem. The common problem is the pathogen, the mode of delivery is applied research. You're not going to hold them all the way through because everything's going to be different. If we're looking at giving individual amino acid feeding to sows, for example, it's going to be a long time before we can do that in poultry. But we might get there in sow feeding sooner rather than later because of different technologies. So, but if we understand the and can work on how do we actually get a better amino acid profile out of corn or soybeans or whatever, that's the high level research. Everybody should be funding that. When you get down to the actual application, then it splits. But at the moment, what we're asking industry to do is, hey, pork people, fund this high level work, this initial work, which could be funded by more than one group. And we should be asking more than one group. And the problem that we've got is that the lead time into these things tends to be always short. I'm not sure why the OMAFRA system takes 8 months from LOI through to getting a result. And if we build in trying to bring in other sectors to fund early stage research, then the lead time is going to be even longer. But I think it's an important thing that we have to try and do, because the appetite for funding early stage research is pretty minimal, even in the federal government level. And they're the ones who should be. Now, maybe we have a new federal government. Maybe this is not going to be a problem anymore. Maybe pigs will fly. Did that kind of answer your question?
Oh, yes.
Jim, just very quick question. First of all, thanks for the excellent talk. You showed a graph where we see that there is decline in the government funding for research.
Yes.
And whatsoever the reason is, but what can be done to stimulate this, stimulate the increase in funding from the research, from LRIC or industry or research point of view?
So a lot of it comes back to that whole business of return on investment. So we have to be able to demonstrate that the money that has gone in is actually providing a bang for buck. And one of the problems that we've got, and we've always had with research, is that it takes a long time to actually see the results play out, and that's a big problem. When we had a lot more disparate industry, so not so much consolidation, and we had a lot more disparate input suppliers, they were interested in picking up the research that was funded by industry, and most of it would have been early stage, so work on vaccines and that type of thing. They would pull that in and they would develop it, and it would eventually find its way into industry. But because of that change, the change in the consolidation, those external changes, we have to be able to demonstrate that we are able to give back something for the return on investment. Now, I don't know how to do that. I mean, one of the ways that we're trying to do it at LRIC now is we're developing or designing an evaluation framework so we're you're either going to love me or hate me. We are investing in a research management system that is based on the one that OMAFRA have, but it also in that, which I know everybody hates that, but we're also building into that an evaluation framework which will go out beyond did the report come in on time and did it come in on budget, and then did they roll out their KTT? Actually, whoever checks that? Nobody really. So we're going beyond that to what was the impact. Now again, these things all take time, but that's the only way in which we're going to get industry to invest in research. And as far as the government goes, I have high hopes that with a new government who actually seem to believe in science, we might see a little bit of a turnaround. And again, we have a lot of responsibility has to be taken by the sector representatives who lobby. They have to say, put more money into research because our industries are important. Right. It was a travesty in 2008, I thought, when we bought car parts for $6 billion when they could have actually chucked a lot more money into agriculture and turbocharged what we do, because people are always going to eat, they're always going to run a roof over their heads, they don't always need to drive cars. Yeah. But what did we do? All the money went to the car industry when what hit the fan and the economy collapsed. So again, it's a case of lobbying, high hopes for the new government, and demonstrating return on investment.
I really enjoy your talk and help me to see the bigger picture. And also, I appreciate what you have done about helping to bring the project to different sector. But also, as a researcher, I'd like to share with you and everybody my challenge about this transition from one single sector to multiple sectors.
Very hard.
In the past, like I have been, one focus is on the pig. For me, we have spent so many years digging into the pig problem and talking in pig language, right? So it's so when we go to the pig producer, we're talking in common language, and we only need to please one sector to get the funding. Right now, if we transfer to multiple sector, or every sector is, for instance, the pig sector will say, okay, Julian, I love your idea, but you need to talk to 4 sectors. If any of them don't fund, that means I will not fund you. In that case, it would be that's my difficulty. And I appreciate that you and your company are helping, but maybe I'm afraid that some of the project might get abortion because one of the sector or maybe we don't talk about the right language for chicken and cow. I didn't put in as many years into those fields, right? But I don't get it.
Right, so let's start with don't talk the right language. You do talk the right language because you're talking about, in your case, pathogens that affect everybody, pretty much, in different ways. And you're talking about an amelioration that you are producing that will actually have a market impact, because if we're using less antibiotics or less traditional antibiotics and using antimicrobial peptides instead, then from a market perspective, that is a big hit goal. That's why when we got you to come and present, it was just present the main key points, because that's all they listen to. Now, the method, how you do that, all that sort of stuff goes off for technical refereeing. If it's good, it stands up. But the bottom line is, in terms of ensuring that you score a goal, is to demonstrate to them exactly the return on investment that they will get from investing in your work. So the common language thing, lift it higher. You're not the person who's going to develop the tube that is going to be used to put into the teat of a cow when it's got mastitis. That's not your job. Your job is to develop the antimicrobial peptide that's going to knock that mastitis out. That's the language they like to hear. This is what it's going to do. And if you need to bring in other people to, like we had Dave Kelton come and talk to us with you, or we talked to him, he now becomes an advocate for you with the dairy industry. So it's a case of getting those connections, those collaborations going, so that you've got advocates on your side who understand that industry. Nobody expects you to learn the language of dairy, but we all want you to know the language pigs you do know, but we want you to know the language of antimicrobial peptides and what they can do. And then let these other guys sort out how they're going to use them. And I don't think just because, it's nice if we can get collaborative funding, always better. But the only time that would really have a negative impact on you would be if the funding agency said, well, we'll only fund you if. The other side of that is that if they haven't got enough money to fund you, you're going to get knocked back straight away. If they haven't got the money. So at least if it's marginal in terms of whether it's going to get over the line or not, it gives you a better chance if you can bring some more money to the table. This is not easy stuff. I mean, this is a paradigm shift, and it's not for everything. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting everybody needs to go out now and make friends. You know, take everybody up the pub and make friends with them and say, you know, coming around for funding. It's just this is a way forward that will help industry, and that will also, I think, help you guys get more money for the work that you're doing.
I would say the last question goes to Maurice.
Thank you. Certainly sold on the cross-sectional approach, but two comments. Tim, I wouldn't be totally pessimistic that as the large get larger, they still will not come to us collectively.
No.
There's always the propriety aspect, but in that case, walking across the ocean, you're not going to be received with open arms and all the trade secrets given to you and come back next year and we'll tell you more. Hands-on, particularly if an organization has a particular problem, I think there could still be partnerships, and it would work out beneficially for both. Second, on your question on patents, just on essential oils, a lot of interesting things, I'm sure, in herbal treatments, a whole lot of things. If I had a company selling those, spent some money, found some good things, tried to sell it, within the week there'd be probably 20 other herbal essential oils. I got the same, yeah, there's the publication, like it doesn't advance. So most organizations will not put the big money in, even for blue sky, unless there's the potential to protect it. Because why wouldn't they? You put the big bucks in, and then you don't get any small bucks back. You're not going to be successful.
I hear you. I'm not going to disagree with you. That's absolutely true. Interestingly, I was talking to the guys at OABA, who are they have a lot of feed companies who are on the, so it was the feed groups that I was speaking to, and we were talking to them about having a cluster project in 2018. And I said, so what is your biggest problem right now? And they said, all the people knocking on our door with prebiotics and probiotics and essential oils, and you know, how do we know which ones work and which ones don't? So I hear you.
Well, having said that, thank you very much again. And
Welcome.
as a token of appreciation, I would like to give this book to you so that you can put it on your nightstand and take a look at it every once in a while. It's edited by Kate Dewey from OBC and Elizabeth Stone, former Dean of OBC. So without further ado, thank you very much, Tim, again for...
Thanks, Shane. Thanks very much, guys.
Two housekeeping items. One is that I have to give credit where it's due. Pizza is provided by Elrics, so we very much appreciate
To
that.
buy my way in.
No, we actually, you know, kind of nicely, very kindly asked Rebecca if this is a possibility. Yeah, of course. So that's great. That was housekeeping item number one. Item two is that please help yourself. If you haven't had lunch, here it is. Thank you very much again.
Thanks, Shane.